Good evening. Thank you all for joining us for our Legislative Oversight Monthly Crime Stats of the Police Department. I'd like to turn the floor over to the Police Commissioner to introduce his team first and then to jump into his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really briefly introduce to the members of my executive and command staff. I have Deputy Commissioner of Operations Michael Sullivan here, Deputy Commissioner of Compliance Daniel Murphy is here, Deputy Commissioner of Administrative Bureau Jim Gillis. One of my newest and most important hires now, Deputy Commissioner of the Public Integrity Bureau Brian Nadeau is here. Of course, my Chief of Staff Eric Melanson is with us. Colonel Cherie Briscoe, the newly promoted Colonel. Chief of Detectives is here. Chief of Patrol, Colonel Rich Worley is here. Lieutenant Colonel of Neighborhood Services Division Monique Brown is with us. Lieutenant Colonel of our Detectives Division John Herzog is here. Chief of Legal Affairs Dan Beck is with us. Director of Government Affairs Michelle Wurzberger is here. And our new Chief Technology Officer Woody Davis is here. And our new Chief Financial Officer Shala Graham is here also. Where are you, Shala? And lastly but not least, Major Jim Roden is with us. And so again, I want to thank you and the members of this committee for allowing me and my team to come before you and update you on our efforts to redesign the Baltimore Police Department into the world-class police department we all know it can be and that our residents deserve.
Commissioner, can you pull the mic a little closer to your...
My team and I have provided you with a slide deck that updates you on where we are with crime, public integrity, staffing, and recruitment, compliance, and even overtime. But for this public safety portion, I'd like to go through the slides we have on the crime and public integrity and the consent decree, and we'll reserve the slides we have for the remainder during the budget portion of tonight's hearing. My staff will be available for you to go through all of the statistics, but I wanted to highlight where we are today in comparison to where we were just a few short months ago. On slide 6, you can see that as of August 10th, we were seeing a 19% increase in the number of homicides and a 29% increase in the number of non-fatal shootings from the prior year. As of today, we are seeing that gap begin to close. We're currently at 9.5% for homicides and 20.7% for non-fatal shootings compared to the same time last year. Every murder and every shooting in our city is unacceptable, and the Baltimore Police Department is working tirelessly to ensure that those who commit these acts of violence in our city are brought to justice. But we're beginning to see the early signs of a new trend where the violence is slowing, but we must continue to remain focused. To help us maintain this focus as promised in my crime plan, we have completely redesigned our CompStat process, and we're still evolving it, which is much more data-driven and strategically focused on how management practices are impacting the crime fight. With our new dashboard, we're giving our command staff the tools they need to ensure our systems of accountability are taking hold and improving the efficiency and effectiveness of our department. On the left, you'll see what the old model used to look like, we would put on the wall, and to the right, you'll see the new and improved digital dashboard. Now, moving into the public integrity slides, here is the most recent data that we have for 2019. I do want to take a moment to discuss the GTTF investigation, as there have been several news reports and most recently a council resolution on this topic. The officers who have participated in the illegal acts committed by the GTTF have disgraced the profession, have hurt our residents, have embarrassed the good men and women who work every day to protect and serve our residents, and most of all, have eroded the public's confidence in this department. I am and have always been absolutely committed to ensuring that a situation like this does not occur again. I'm also committed to finding out how and why the GTTF members were able to engage in that kind of activity for so long. So in close coordination with Judge Bredar, we have been working for months with the consent decree monitoring team in the Department of Justice to figure out how to conduct such a comprehensive study the appropriate way. In fact, we'll be discussing this very topic at our meeting tomorrow with the judge tomorrow. We've been working on this for a few months now with the end goal of announcing a strategy and a timeline for this review to be completed. We're proud to say that tomorrow we're actually having a discussion as to the selection of the outside entity that we believe will be able to undergo this task. This effort will go a long way to repair our relationship with the public and ensuring that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past in the Baltimore Police Department. In fact, I recruited Brian Nadeau to serve as our new Deputy Commissioner from the Federal Bureau of Investigation to now lead our Public Integrity Bureau because he has the extensive experience of investigating public corruption at all levels in the government. But more importantly, he has firsthand experience with the GTTF investigation. He played a key role in ensuring that the corrupt officers were fully investigated and arrested. And I knew we needed someone with that frame of reference, managing how we improve, how we accept, investigate, and adjudicate claims of misconduct and establish a culture of accountability in our police department. Deputy Commissioner Nato has been with the department now for just under 2 months and is working closely with our monitoring team and the Department of Justice representatives to initiate some important and sustainable changes. Baltimore has the most comprehensive consent decree in all of the country, but it is necessary framework for us to fix many of our deficiencies. So I am happy to report that with just 4 months left of the 2 years, the second year of the implementation, we've completed quite a bit of a work that I'm proud of our team for the work they've done. I want to give you a snapshot of some of the work we've been doing. This week, the Baltimore Police Department will complete the new use of force training that began in June. This represents the very first training that all BPD members have undergone directly related to the consent decree. This also means that the updated use of force policies are the first policies related to the consent decree that will be fully implemented, which is a significant milestone. We are investing in our officers, providing them with the knowledge, the expertise, and the skills they need to do their job and to be in compliance with the consent decree. BPD is now working with the monitoring team and the DOJ to develop a 2-day training on stops, searches, and arrests, which will cover over a dozen new and revised policies for how officers interact with the public. The public will get a chance to review the lesson plans and training materials in order to provide feedback on November 1st, which marks the first public comment period. Training on these policies is scheduled to begin in January 2020, after additional public comment periods and approval by the DOJ and the court. Then the community policing plan, with the technical assistance provided by the Police Foundation, is currently under development. The plan represents the department's vision, best practices, and extensive community input. The public will have additional opportunities for their voice to be included in the plan during the first public comment period, which is slated to begin on November 25th. The first draft staffing plan is almost complete, as you heard me say earlier, and will be available for public comment on November 8th. The behavioral health gap analysis draft report is currently available for public comment. This comprehensive review conducted with the CPIC will be finalized in December after an additional public comment period and DOJ and court approval. As I've said in the past, when it comes to our foundational technology systems that impact every member of our department, we are in the dark ages. I'm pleased to announce that a new addition to my executive team, our Chief Technology Officer, Woody Davis, who is here to guide our efforts and implement a long-term strategy to bring us into modern-day policing environment. A critical project that he will be leading is the selection and implementation of a new records management system for which has been out for an RFI, or request for information, for almost 2 weeks now, which will help us identify the right system for the BPD to procure and to go forward, which takes us from a paper environment to a digital environment. I have been upfront and at times brutally honest about my findings because when I was recruited to come here, my charge was to fix every aspect of the department, and I never skirt around the truth or gloss over the deficiencies that we discover. That's because we need to be clear and transparent with how much work needs to be done and just how long it will take for us to be successful. So thank you, and I'll pause right now for questions about public safety.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Commissioner. The first thing I would like to talk about are, we're going to come back to homicides and shootings, but I want to talk about robberies and carjackings to lead into something else. So I know that robberies are down this year. We know that that's a great thing, but we know carjacking specifically, we've seen a spike in those. Can you first just talk about the trends that we're seeing with robberies? I know we have a lot of robberies that we're seeing with groups of juveniles, and we know that at least the last time we were told that carjackings were having young people basically being paid to steal cars in order for other folks to commit robbery, shootings, homicides with those vehicles. Can you talk about, from an overarching view, what we're seeing on the streets of robbery, with robberies and carjackings in the city?
So I can tell you anecdotally that there are groups of individuals, by and large young people, who are committing multiple armed robberies. And when they are committing carjackings, they're stealing those cars from residents and from people so that they can use them to commit other crimes and to joyride, but by and large to commit other crimes. Here's what the chiefs across America are saying when we talk. The phenomenon of stealing cars is evolving. For those of us who have bought a new car recently, most all new cars in the past several years have a electronic digital key fob. So the art of stealing a car the way it used to be done is evolving, and so you actually need the electronic device for the car to start and move. So the evolution of stealing a car to taking it from somebody is kind of where that's going. That's what chiefs are seeing around the country. So, but that's anecdotal. Now, we have groups of young people who are committing armed robberies, and that trend is somewhat tied to many of our shootings. What we have found is that, and we did press conferences on this in some recent arrests, that some of the juveniles who were committing shootings, those shootings were a result of robberies that have gone bad. And or the victims tried to get away or escape or didn't give up or refused to turn over the property to the perpetrator. Those are tied. We've made some arrests. There are people who are in custody who are tied to a number of robberies around the city. And so that's some of what we're seeing on the streets of Baltimore.
And so just to that point, can we talk about what kind of things we're putting in place to deal with them? And then more importantly, how many arrests for robberies have we made this year?
I can let our colonel talk about some of the arrests that we've made, but we have, as you know from our last time we were here, talked about decentralization of detectives, specifically robbery detectives back to the districts, but in a very coordinated fashion. We're investigating those independent robberies that are happening in districts, but still working with our citywide robbery unit and crime analysts to tie those cases, those people, those guns, those victims to each other so that we can understand patterns of robberies that they're committing and then investigate them as patterns and as groups. And there are a number of those investigations that are underway. There are a number of arrests that we've already made, some with groups and some with individuals.
One second, Colonel.
Can you turn on her mic?
Good evening, Council President. So with regards to specific numbers, I can provide the specific numbers in that category, but I can tell you our clearance rate for carjacking specifically at this point is 22.12% of carjackings. And just as the Commissioner said, we have seen the trend of juveniles being involved in those patterns. So I'll give you the overarching numbers specifically for carjacking year to date.
Yeah, well, can go back a little bit, Colonel. So what's the national clearance rate for carjackings?
So at this juncture, there has not been a defined national just for carjacking.
It's just a
because
simple
it is
armed
a
robbery.
Yeah,
because
I know it's armed robbery. I didn't know if they
it's
broke
classified
out.
under the National Armed Robbery Statute.
Okay. So how many total arrests have we made for armed robbery this year? That's the other question.
For armed robbery this
Yep.
year, I'll have to get you that number, sir.
So these were some of the things that we wanted you guys to be prepared to talk about today. So we would try to get those before the hearing. The hearing is over, and then also the clearance rate for the robbery arrest.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I said that to say to this point, when we're only clearing 22%, wanted to see what kind of technology and other resources that we can use and that we are using to help with robberies and carjackings. In particular, I'm thinking about license plate reader units and CCTV cameras. Can you talk about how we're using them now? And I don't know if we can, expect you guys to be able to answer that today, but how many we've cleared with the use of LPRs or CCTV when we're talking about robberies and carjackings?
So we use that for all of our crimes, but specifically for those violent offenses like robberies and carjackings. License plate readers, both the mobile license plate readers and our crime cameras, whether they are city cameras in public right-of-ways and or private cameras owned by businesses and residents of Baltimore. And we use that into the watch center and City Watch so that we can gather evidence and use that to solve those cases. Some of them we were able to solve that led to the clearance rate. It does need to improve. We do need better cameras. Some of them are very old generation cameras. So there needs to be an investment into the evolution of the newest technology, both with more license plate readers but more CCTV cameras, and also the investment that citizens can make in cameras on their homes and our businesses that we can go to when crimes are committed to help solve these cases. That's the way to reduce robbery, by making sure when we catch them that we hold them accountable, because they're committing multiple robberies. But we're using all of that technology. We're using crime analysts, both here in the police department and with our federal partners and state partners, to build good quality cases, to connect them to other cases, other people, other days, times, weeks, and events.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. So you just need more of them and better cameras. So the follow-up to that is, and I'm glad that the city solicitor is still here, because we have this individual who has met with members of the council, who wants us to retry this trial for the spy plane. And for the amount, I actually calculated it myself, for the amount that the foundation or whoever is going to pay for that plane would cost, we could get roughly about 40 new City Watch cameras and 60 license plate reader units a year. And I just want for you to talk about what you have heard about that technology so far, and then for our city solicitor to explain to the public once and for all, answer the question of, does this body, Mr. Solicitor, have any authority or any legal standing to say whether the commissioner uses or does not use that spy plane technology?
You want me to answer?
Yeah,
first?
you can answer. Yeah, you're fine.
First, I did meet with the gentleman who has the spy plane and the spy plane concept. I've actually met with him twice in my 7 months that I've been here, early on and then much recently. And this has not been done in an American city. And so there's no way to validate the way he forecasts his crime reduction percentages. And because he can't validate that, it has not been done in an American city. There is no way to answer how it will work. It is a prediction at best.
Thank you. And to that point, Mr. Commissioner, you have been involved with major city chiefs and all those associations. Yes. And have any of the other chiefs ever talked about this technology, or have they been more concerned or more willing to try CCTV, LPRs, things that have proven records of reducing crime?
I've never had a chief in a discussion about that spy plane, and not a chief in this country that I've met with.
Thank you. Mr. Solicitor?
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I can tell you, Mr. President, that from a legal perspective, constitutional perspective, state constitution, state laws, federal laws, there is absolutely no impediment, constitutionally speaking, legally speaking, to the use of that technology.
That's not the question, Mr.
Okay,
Solicitor.
I want to make sure I understand it.
No, thank you. The question was whether this body, either myself or any of the council members, has the authority to tell the commissioner whether he should use or does not use that technology. By law.
That's a much harder question, Mr. President. Does this body have the authority? I think this body has the authority to say whatever it wants to say.
Legally binding, Mr. Solicitor.
Legally binding? I don't think this body can tell a Baltimore City Police Commissioner how to run the Baltimore City Police Department. Obviously, this is ground that has been gone over many, many times, many years. The fact of the matter is the Baltimore City Police Department is a state agency. Baltimore City Police Commissioner is a state official, and under the public local law, this body simply is displaced from the authority to exercise binding authority over the Baltimore City Police Department. Now, this body could refuse to give the Baltimore City Police Department any money. You could do that and put the Baltimore City Police Department out of business.
You don't have to worry about that,
want to see
Mr.
that
Commissioner.
happen.
You don't have to worry about that.
I don't think anybody wants to see that happen. But no, as you know, Mr. President, the public local laws of Maryland for 170 years have been that the Baltimore City Police Department is a state agency, and there are limitations. And of course, we went to Annapolis, Mr. President. In fact,
Together.
you mentioned the other day, you and I were sitting together at that committee table trying to convince the good folks down in Annapolis to return local control to the city, and it didn't happen. And so we'll see where that goes going forward.
Thank you.
I hope I've been responsive, Mr. President.
Very much so. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I will stop hogging the questions for now.
Thanks. Before I turn it over to other questions, I just wanted to ask one quick follow-up. Mr. Commissioner, in regards to the spy plane, is there an actual written proposal with a commitment of funds from any foundation to pay for it?
I don't know about a written proposal. I know about conversations.
So there's verbal commitments, but there's no proposal in writing that guarantees anybody paying for anything.
What I know about is conversations. I don't have any firsthand information about commitments. I know about conversations about someone or some entity underwriting it.
That might, okay. You can come up to the, thanks. If you can just state your name for the record, thank you.
Sure. Sunny Schnitzer, Mayor's Office, Deputy Chief of Staff for Public Safety. Thank you. The city has not received a formal proposal, nor have there been explicit commitments of funds for this program.
Gotcha. And have you, are you aware of the potential funders? Have you spoken to them? Have they said that they will fund everything that has verbally been spoken about?
We have not spoken to them, no.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Sneed?
Thank you. I know early on you mentioned, Commissioner, that you were forcing police officers to do paperwork or to sit in their cars and check in at different, I believe, stores or different places in the community. And I just wanted to know first how that was going, if we have a number for how many check-ins we are doing on the east side of Baltimore and on the Eastern District.
I think we do have that information. We compile that. I don't have that information. Where is Colonel Worley?
We get a daily report on how many business checks that they do. I can give you the daily numbers for yesterday, but it's usually up around 500 or 600 total for the city.
Do we break it down by district? I'm just
Yes,
okay.
I can give you yesterday's numbers. The bank and business checks in the Eastern yesterday were 41. Southeast was 38. You want all the districts?
No, I was just curious about Eastern District. There's been 3 shootings right there on Biddle and Monument, Biddle and Milton. And at this point, residents have asked for a meeting. They just don't know. It's the same open air drug market that's been there essentially before you even got here that we keep bringing noise to. But the fact that it's just been shootings at the same locations, and no matter what time you go past this location, it seems to be people hanging out. It seems to be dice games going. I mean, just open air drug market. So I'm just curious for what do I tell the residents who are living in this community that are fed up? What are we doing to
So there are a number of things that we're doing. First, there's the deployment to the micro zones and to those really negatively affected areas for the officers to go there, but not to sit in cars, but to actually get out and engage with members of the community and to take the enforcement action necessary when they see violations. And so it's designed to be a combination of both in small doses where they go to these areas to disrupt those kinds of activities that you're describing, to take the necessary enforcement action if an arrest needs to be made to do that, but just to engage with the community members, with the owners and managers of those stores, and to make sure we check in. Not only are they doing that, but they're documenting the stops in a log inside the store. They're recording it on body camera so that we can audit that and we can check that to verify that that work is actually being done. We understand that there have been a number of shootings there, and we've added additional resources there to do that, but there are also covert operations that are taking place there by members of our department and with other agencies. That things that we don't often talk about, but there are a number of things that are always at play and in work, especially when we see an influx of violent crime like we've seen, especially at that one location.
So there are actually check-ins happening right there where they actually get out and check in at the store?
At the store, yes, we can go to those stores and check the logs to make sure the officers are going in, signing the logs, and then we can go back and check their body camera to make sure that that's actually happening. And that's how we calculate that, to know that that's happening.
And
So
something's unique about that one is there was 2 homicide detectives inside of the store when the last shooting occurred. By the time they came out to find the victim, patrol was already performing CPR on the victim, so they were within a block doing their area canvass inside of the very store that you're probably talking about, looking for video footage and anything else they could find when the shooting occurred.
So I want to go back to, so what do we tell residents? What do I tell the residents in East Baltimore? Because they seem to think nothing's changing.
Well, I think the message is that the officers are in fact coming there. We are in fact working to make them safer, that we are in fact sending them there to enforce the law and to have high levels of community engagement and to arrest people who are committing violations and to try to hold them accountable. That we want to make sure that we are redesigning our department to be effective, and we want to make sure that there are strong and certain consequences for the people who are committing these bad acts, both in drug sales and in violent crime. And we are attacking it with everything that we have, and we will continue to do that.
So have arrests been made from this corner? This is my last question, colleagues. But do we know how many arrests have been made for this corner right there in Milton and
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can get it for you.
We can get that
Thank
to you.
Councilman Cohn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. I want to hone in a little bit closer on what President Scott was saying in relation to robberies. The robbery numbers, the carjackings across the city and in Southeast Baltimore, where I represent, just remain unacceptably high. It not only creates fear and anxiety and, in many cases, physical violence within the individual victim, but spreads fear and trauma throughout communities. And so seeing the very significant increase, particularly in carjackings, is incredibly disturbing. And I wanted to hone in a little bit deeper on what exactly the department's response is. My understanding is that it is a relatively small group of folks who are committing these very violent crimes, often who themselves have long criminal histories. And so I'm curious where the disconnect is, if it's a small group of people that keep getting caught for similar violent crimes, what are we missing in terms of either rehabilitation or accountability or just having some form of deterrent, because it continues to happen and it is, as I said, deeply disturbing and unacceptable to our citizens here.
Well, I think everyone in the room will agree with you. It's disturbing and it is unacceptable. So what we're doing about it is many of the things we've talked about, and you've seen us deploy additional resources to not only your area, but many of the areas that are affected by the robbery trends that are affected by the robberies. So that we move city resources around to other districts to supplement the manpower that's in districts, some of which is staffed with overtime. Some of it is just moving the citywide resources around to create high levels of visibility and deterrence, because robbery is a crime of opportunity. Unlike shootings and murders are crimes of passion and premeditation, these are crimes of opportunity. So deterrent effect and displacement effect are what we are able to do. And then we've apprehended quite a few of these individuals and made arrests of them for not only one but multiple robberies. And then it comes back to what I've said earlier. It has to be strong and certain consequences. And as you've eloquently stated, they're doing it again and again. So it's beyond the arrest portion. It has to do with arrest. It has to do with good quality cases. And this is exactly why I have advocated it. We are on the way to making sure we have an analyst assigned to our state's attorney's office that can analyze all of our cases and make sure that we are turning in good quality products that don't result in individuals being either refused by the state's attorney and or pled down or rejected or refused in court, or dismissed in court rather, because of something we did. And this is to help us improve the quality of cases that we make when we do arrest those individuals. So it is all of it that we're doing. Deployment strategies, with smart deployment strategies, knowing when they occur, where they occur, finding out through our crime analysts who we think the bad actors are, and interviewing and interrogating to the extent that we can to learn who other bad actors are, and then making sure we build good quality cases. And that's a big part of our crime plan, working with our federal and state partners to make sure when we catch people, they're held accountable and they're not out to repeat and reoffend.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate you not throwing other parties under the bus, but wherever the disconnect is between BPD, state's attorney, judges, wherever we are losing ground, it really needs to be fixed. There has to be strong coordination. Folks in our communities are begging for strong cases that are well coordinated,
Yes.
That consequences be appropriate, that there is rehabilitation happening within the system, because we don't want to lock people up and throw away the key. It just, again, feels like there is some miss that continues to happen, and folks continue to suffer as a result.
And we understand that. Not only do we understand it, we agree. There are many of these juveniles who are committing these crimes who are going in and are not staying in and are coming out and are reoffending, knowing that they just got caught. And so we are working diligently to make sure that we can do all that we can do in our due diligence to provide the best possible criminal cases for prosecution, so that it is not a police error in any way that causes that person to not be out.
And I want to be clear that I think this represents multiple systems failure, everything from the health department,
Yes.
our school system, that we have young people who are continuously getting caught up in these activities demonstrates to me, again, that we are failing to meet their needs, to deal with the underlying trauma that so many of them present, and that we are then failing to apply appropriate consequences or have some form of accountability and rehabilitation, remediation.
But that's
for the
exactly why you hear me and see me advocate so much for a comprehensive violence reduction strategy that deals with root causes, and to treat the trauma that you're talking about and to fix the core issues that will make them choose crime in the first place. That has to happen in addition to good quality policing.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I would just close by saying appreciate your sense of urgency, just speaking for myself in terms of whatever rift the union within BPD is bringing in your direction. I support your crime plan and the work that you all are doing, and hope and expect to see a very high level of urgency among your force moving forward.
Yes, sir, and thank you.
It's a good endorsement. All right,
Yes, sir.
Council
Thank
President.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, just to follow up, as you know, one of the first things that you and I talked about when you got here was the disconnect that we said. We actually in a meeting together where you found out that there was nobody analyzing that kind of data, and we set the path forward, but to figuring out how to hire those data analysts. But at the August the 8th hearing, we were actually told that those people were identified and going to be hired by this hearing. So has that not happened yet?
Yep.
Am I supposed to be nice? Hi, good afternoon, good evening, Mr. President and members of the council. Yes.
And who are you?
Ganesha Martin, Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. We were moving along. I got 26 resumes, reviewed those, sent those as well to the Chief of Staff. We were in the midst, I was trying to do kind of a parallel process in which we were working on an MOU. I recently received a memo from the legal department that states that the data cannot come directly to me because I'm not a law enforcement agency. And so I reviewed or received actually just now, I was reviewing it, a revised MOU where the where they've worked it out where it's possible that we can move forward, but I still need to review that before we can do that.
So, Mr. Stegman, this is really for you. I'm not comprehending or understanding how the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, who the Mayor of Baltimore decided was going to convene and be in charge of this task, was then told by another city agency that they can't receive the data. That just doesn't add up to me. And what's happening as a result, and actually I'll pause for a second. Director Martin, so how's that impacted? How long is that going to delay us getting people in the seats?
So I think if I review it and it's something that I can agree to, it actually still accomplishes the ends of what we were trying to achieve, then, you know, we can, the police commissioner and I can sign it and Madam State's Attorney can sign it and we can move forward. I just received it, so I need to review it, but I think that they've tried to come up, and I think maybe Dan Beck may be able to speak to it, but they've tried to come up with a way where it still works, but that we're not violating CJIS.
Yeah. So, I mean, but for me, it's just when's the earliest date that the people can actually be in their jobs now? Because this is something that we've literally been talking about for years, but since February, since the commissioner got here, because we can only hold him accountable since he's been here.
Do you want to say something? Go ahead.
So Eric Molasaw, Chief of Staff for the BPD. The hiccup that we caught was a CJIS issue,
Yep.
and the provisions of CJIS in Maryland law, pursuant to the guidance we received from the legal affairs sections, state that for us to do this right, they have to either be a BPD employee or a state's attorney employee. And so that's the movement that we're moving on now. And so the commitment from our administration is to continue with the effort. We're going to provide the funding for it from the mayor's office in a form of an MOU, and that's what we're changing now. Because the path we were going to go on was to hire an MOCJ employee, which is not a law enforcement agency. So it's this hiccup in the state law with CJIS. It's actually something I want to look at as part of a legislative package down the road because—
Sounds good. Sign me up.
Yeah, and so because clearly the Office of Criminal Justice needs to have the ability to have victim and witness information for us to be effective in its ability to create the wraparound services that we know it's going to need. It's a similar model that we used in Louisiana, but that state's provisions on how it handles CJIS was different from the state of Maryland. And so we want to try to bring some of those useful tools for us. But we came in with an expectation, but we came up against a restriction in the law. So we're working around it, but we're working with all due speed. We do have the process by which we're vetting the resumes now. So we'll have a selection done, but for us, we need to be able to create that formalized agreement so that the funding can fund the state's attorney's office for the position and that we have the right performance metrics in place for that. And that's what
I love it. Thanks. And again, I'll be there with bells on in Annapolis. They're used to me coming and yelling and screaming about changing
We
things.
were at the point, I think we were at the point of selection.
So
The
what's
MOU
the
is
new
drafted
point?
and the funding
Yeah.
is there until this technicality.
What's the new point of selection? When do we think the people will be hired? When we think the people will be hired? Because we were told that they were going to be hired last month, and now we're in October. Are they going to be hired by November, December, or this is something we're going to now kick off in 2020?
Yeah, no, I don't think that we have the leisure to wait that long. I don't want to speak on behalf of Madam State's Attorney. I don't know her hiring process. We've looked over there. There's some people that are potential that we could hire, and so depending on what her process is, so I would assume that we would be able to do it within a month's time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You have to do interviews and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Okay.
Vice Chair Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Commissioner, I had just a really quick follow-up on the President's question on this spy plane proposal. Can you talk about the outcomes in the outcome data? My understanding is that was used in 2015, I believe. Can you talk about the number of arrests or crimes solved with the usage of that technology?
I cannot, because in that time, it was a short period of time, to my recollection, less than a couple of weeks, 13 days, and there was very limited participation by the police department. So I don't think any data was actually collected then and are safe to be able to present on that.
Okay, so it sounds, based on the line of questioning and your responses from both the President and your responses, is that there isn't just enough data, any data to really substantiate
That is correct.
Effectiveness of this at any point in its usage at all. You might have to use the mic up front.
Just to specify, in the 13 days that it was up, it captured aerial footage of certain crimes that were caught, but none of it turned into evidentiary packets that would have led to an arrest. So for us, again, we want to make sure that the claims that are being made by the program are based on data-driven analysis, and there's simply not enough data on a 13-day window to be able to infer the kind of reduction goals that have been purported by this. We've spoken to them about that, and they've discontinued making those claims. But for us, again, we want to make sure that the solutions we're pushing forward are data-driven and proven solutions as much as possible.
And I'm supportive of that. I just wanted to ask the question for the record. Yes, in September, it was announced that there was a new coordinated effort with Baltimore Police Department, State's Attorney's Office, and the Governor's Office to, if I recall correctly, monthly or bi-monthly meetings, information sharing, the hiring of shared staff. Can you give us an update on where that stands currently?
I think that's the announcement of it. I have not personally participated in that as of yet.
Okay, so it's not underway as of yet? Not
as of yet.
Do you know if there's a target start date that has been announced or will be announced?
I do not.
Okay. And the last question I had for this round, Mr. Chair, because I know there's a number of my colleagues have questions. What I noticed in this month, the information provided to the committee around police officer applications did not include hiring data. Are you able to provide demographic information of the hires to the committee? Because I think that'd be useful information for us to analyze the outcomes of that. Okay.
Yes, we do have it. We can get that to you.
Okay, and I'll stop there. I did have more other questions, but I want to get through the rest of the list. Got it. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and I want to thank you and your team for all you do for our city. I don't know if mine is more of a statement than a question. And I'm going to say right up front that I'm not a statistician, or I don't feel like I'm exceptionally skilled as it relates to data. And I want to make certain that, if we're truly having success, that we properly celebrate it. But when I look at the slide on number 6 with closing the gap, and I'm operating with limited data, it looks more like our success is more attributed to the fact that August and September of 2018 seemed to be an exceptionally violent 2 months, more so than we had great reductions in homicide. And so I just want us to kind of caution,
That is not a success that we're bragging about.
I don't want us to break our arms, patting our
That is
back,
correct.
because it looks like I don't want us to say what the data isn't saying. So I just wanted to.
Yes, but that's why I called it a trend and not something that was done to arrive at it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Council President?
And Mr. Commissioner, I was going to dig into that a little bit later, too. I think that I agree with the councilman. We have to be very cautious, just because while I'm ecstatic that crime goes down, if it goes down 1%, I'm going to be ecstatic about that. But just looking back at the periods of where we were last year, I think that we have to make sure that way. And this is why I always ask for us to put up the other years, especially 2014, so that as I always say, you measure yourself at your best, not at your worst. But as the councilman was saying, when you look at even the 7-day period that we just ended, 9/29, in that period last year, based off the data that was given to us last year, there were 16 homicides in that period. So I know we had a big drop in that period, but we were up against a very, very rough week. And we just have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can each and every day to make sure that those ties don't come back the other way.
That is correct, absolutely.
Councilwoman McCray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, historically, we've had issues with service response time within the Northeast District. I want to know, how has the service response time improved under the new crime plan?
I think it's rather early to be able to claim any victory for response time, but what I can tell you that we're doing is analyzing crime data and call for service data to ascertain what we are responding to that we should not be responding to, so that we can eliminate that and put that in the appropriate city agency, number one. Number two, we're looking at incidents like burglar alarms and or vehicle accidents that we're responding to that we shouldn't have to respond to, and how to work out the appropriate response to that to free up time, which would give us faster response times. One of the goals you saw me lay out in our crime plan is a first-time goal to have a response time goal of 10 minutes or less on emergency crimes, because I know there are high wait times for citizens when they call, especially in emergencies sometimes. What we can say is that with one particular call in particular, gunfire, ShotSpotter, the technology in both east and west part of the city, is detecting gunfire and it's dispatching through technology to the officers far faster than the citizen can actually hear it, get to the phone, and call 911. And so those response time are exponentially faster than the 911s when citizens actually call, because there's a delay there. What we're working to do is find the calls and create what we call burden reductions. What can we do to reduce the workload of the officers so that we can free up that time that translates to improved response times? So all of that we're working on now. I think it's too early to tell yet, because everything that we lay out in the plan is not yet fully implemented, but we're working. That's one of the first things we're doing, identifying what the burden reduction calls we can eliminate and or put in the other city agencies so that we can create that free time to accomplish that goal that you're talking about.
Just got a follow-up question. So you mentioned the 10-minute for emergency response calls. How much closer are we to that goal? I know you're saying it's early, but how much closer are we to that goal?
I think we're only a couple of minutes out on average. And I think on average, if you correct me, Eric, it's somewhere around the 12 or 13 minute on average. And then there's the average response time and median response time. On average, I think it's 12 minutes. But on emergency calls like crimes in progress, where a perpetrator is on scene, where a crime is in progress and or gunfire is going off, we're still getting to the gunfire calls within 2 minutes. We're still getting to those crimes really fast. It's on average the calls where a perpetrator is not on scene or a person is not injured. It is those calls that kind of are the outliers that take us above the 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I thank you for that, Commissioner, because prior to your initiative, we weren't sure at all how long it was taking to get the call. So I'm glad you guys are measuring and continuing to work towards that goal. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Commissioner and your team. I guess it's one question, comment together. So, you know, at our council meetings, we continue to give a moment of silence for the number of shootings and the opioid crisis epidemic. And sitting here, I, was thinking a number of the fatal or non-fatal shootings are, I wonder how many are from addicted young people. Are you keeping data on, when you arrest someone, are you keeping the data on if that person was addicted to something? And, I happened to have a conversation a couple of days ago with Safe Streets, and, they're on the streets, and that was one of the conversations that they see when they're on the streets, that a number of the people that are doing these shootings are people are addicted to an opioid or something, and they resort to these violent ways to get money or to do what they have to do. And I know a couple of our council members have brought up the connection with other agencies, particularly the health department. I think it's important that that we need to start keeping that specific data of addiction, particularly with the opioid addiction. We know that the EMS at the fire department continue to give the Naxalon. There has to be, we need information on how serious this is when people are out there particularly shooting with guns to help with their addiction.
I agree, and that's another reason why I advocate so much for this comprehensive violence reduction strategy. And yes, we keep some of the data. When I say some of it, we certainly keep data on naloxone applications. We certainly keep data on overdoses, especially when we are dispatched and are on the scene for that and are deploying naloxone. To the extent that we know and can ask and can learn that on the scene of an arrest or when a person is victimized because they have been shot and are injured, and in our interview and interrogation, when we learn that, yes, we keep that data. Many times it's not revealed voluntarily or upon request, but to the extent that through our investigation we learn, we absolutely keep that.
So if someone does request it, like someone from the health department, can you give that data to them?
On an individual that they may have a request about, I think we can go and find that certainly we can know everything about their criminal history, what they've been involved in with law enforcement. To the extent that they are currently addicted, that's information that's not readily available unless the person reveals it to us, and then we document it. When they do reveal it, we document it.
So are you
I think it should be a good practice that we could learn that and ask that. To the extent people would be honest and open to tell us, we can certainly do that, because I think that's good data to always have.
Do you feel that in most cases of shootings that somehow alcohol, opioid addiction is a big cause?
I think it is. I think it is a cause, and when people are victims because they're shot, and then we're arriving at a scene to render now medical aid to a victim, I think we can know that about that person through either our interaction with them or interacting with medical professionals who are treating them. Mm-hmm. We can know that. When it comes to perpetrators being arrested, I think it is a different dynamic.
And just for the committee, that might be something that we need to get more information on, to somehow connect some of these agencies to you know, be apart some kind of way, and at least trying to find treatment for these folks, instead of us just continually locking up, you know, we're still going through the same process, and we got to break, and you say it over and over again, trying to
Right.
break cycles. It's more than one cycle of different things.
And I think that's probably an effort, a coordinated effort between our medical emergency personnel, because they kind of deal with the medical side and, you know, making a diagnosis more so than law enforcement. But I think it's something that's very important for us to know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. For just pause for 1 second. I know we have a representative from the State's Attorney's Office that wants to address the issue. Do you want to tell us where you guys are on the analyst positions really quickly? And thank you for being here, ma'am.
Good evening, council members and council president. Yes, I'm short. So I just wanted to tell you that
Ma'am,
I
know who you are, but you have to
I'm Jan
it's being
Bledsoe.
watched tonight.
I'm one of the deputies at the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. I reviewed probably 40 plus resumes over the last week and a half. We have picked about 10-ish at this point that we believe qualify, and interviews will be being set up within the next week or two.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, to go back to something really quickly, we know that you put in place the micro zones. Can you just give us a quick update on the impact that we're seeing there? Are we seeing reductions in the micro zones? And then also, I know you guys said you were going to monitor displacement. Are we seeing displacement from them as well?
Yes, actually, what we're seeing is the reductions haven't come as quickly as we hoped. They're right around the same as what they were, but what we are seeing is the officers are spending more time in it as we get further into it. The Southwest was a pilot, and they actually do it the best because they've been doing it the longest, but we've also seen the displacement where the officers are spending the time in the heart of the microzone. It's pushing it out to the outskirts and to basically away from the microzones. So as long as we stay on the plan and the officers continue, we will see the reductions. I think it's still too early to tell with the city huge the reductions that we're going to expect.
So, Colonel, can you I don't know if you have the data. Could you go through the zones for us if you have data comparisons to tell us where the zones are this year versus last year?
I don't, because it's 123 of the zones.
You can start from number one.
You can start from one and go to the bottom. If we can, over the next several days, get that information over to us, it would be appreciated. And then also for the displacement, just want to see if the displacement numbers are equal to more or less than the incidents that happened in that zone as well before, just to see how we're doing.
Yep.
Mr. Commissioner,
Yes.
you know that for me, the most important arrest that we can make in Baltimore are gun arrests. So I just want to see where we are in gun arrests so far this year, year to date versus last year, but also, more importantly, how many of the individuals that we have arrested with guns this year are what we call VROs or ARIs?
We are very active in making gun arrests. There was a week or so ago, we were talking, I think there were 11 gun arrests over a 3 or 4 day period. So the officers are actually out there being very proactive and are looking for the bad actors who are carrying guns, by the way, which is the prerequisite for shooting someone.
That's right.
So they are connected. But Colonel, can you give us the year-to-date numbers for gun arrests?
Yes, sir. The year-to-date numbers for gun arrests are 1,000. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. 1,048 year-to-date.
And what was it last year, Colonel?
1,162.
So we're down just a little. And how many of those individuals are VROs or ARIs?
That one I'll turn over to Colonel Briscoe.
So we don't have a number. We can tell you we've prioritized with our GVED cases, and of those GVED cases, there are 50 cases that we've prioritized. It's Tier 1 cases. And to follow up to your earlier question about robberies, I do apologize for the delay. We've had 731 arrests thus far this year for robbery. However, that's all of robbery classification, not broken out by carjacking or any other.
And how many robbery arrests did we have at this time last year?
This time last year, we had 522.
So they're up. Thank you. Commissioner, I think that I appreciate the Colonel's information, but if the strategy is going to be that we're targeting VROs, then in order for us all to work better together when we're making these arrests, we have to be able to track that. So the only way that myself, the mayor's office, this council, the state general assembly, to a lesser extent, can hold you guys accountable is if we're knowing who we're targeting. And then that also, when that data is shared, then it allows communities to be empowered to say, these are, this is happening on the streets of Baltimore. And we've gotten that information before, so if we could get that breakdown over the next couple of days, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to do a shameless plug for the gun violence as a public health crisis hearing scheduled for October 30th at 5 p.m. Council Vice President, that'd be a great place to have this conversation because the health department is going to be there. And if you'd like, I can put that request in ahead of the hearing because I think you're raising an excellent point. So, but for all those watching, please come to that as well. Mr. Commissioner, can you, and I sent this information or request in ahead of time, so hopefully you are prepared to speak about it. As you know, I co-chair the Baltimore City Human Trafficking Collaborative. There was a big arrest made in the rescue of 2 women in Southeast Baltimore yesterday. So just wanted to say kudos to your detectives in breaking that case and to the state's attorney's office as well, and wishing them luck in that prosecution. One of the big connections with human trafficking is missing children. Are you able to speak to compliance with the 2012 Felicia's Law, which was passed by Senator Carter, that requires, where are we with compliance with that, with the posting of information on missing children? And can you speak to the process just so the public has an understanding? Because recently I met with an individual who's a huge advocate for missing children and trafficked children, and revealed that misinformation was being given out by patrol officers around reporting or filing of police reports, which is supposed to go to the National Center for Missing Children. But these things are interconnected. One of the statistics that we do know with trafficking victims is that if a child is missing within 48 hours, they are likely to encounter a trafficker. And so the concern that I have is, one, where are we with investigating these cases, compliance with state law, reporting? I know there's supposed to be a database. Can you just give us an overview of where we are with that, or if anyone from your team can do so?
Sure.
So with regards to Felicia's Law that was passed in 2012, which requires us to, as we do by state law, enter into NCIC all of those missing persons, and that information is uploaded to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and our partner, Ms. Proudfoot, provides that information. It is the state's requirement to publish a list every year. We provide that information, and we have been in compliance to that standard with regards to our responsibility for missing and exploited children.
And can you just speak for a quick second, just for myself, the public, and the committee members, what residents are supposed to do if a child does go missing? What is their expectation from the Baltimore Police Department in reporting that information?
So the expectation is immediately notify the police department and provide all pertinent information in regards to that child, what that child was wearing the date of missing, provide a picture, and that information is immediately published and pushed out. As you very well know, we use our various means of social outlet, not just internally but externally to the community through social media, and we start to work that case. We do everything humanly possible, and that means we use units on the ground, we use Foxtrot in the air to help search for that missing child. child, but the expectation for police with community regards is to have immediately report. There is no wait time for that child. Immediately report that child missing and have all of the pertinent information as to who has seen that child last, routes of travel, what that child may have been wearing, and who that child may have been last in accompaniment with, and provide a picture.
Thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was what the confusion was. I know I personally had a constituent last year who was told by a patrol officer that they had to wait 48 hours to file a report. That turned out to be incorrect information, and I do know that clarity has been sent out to the department, so I was happy to hear that was immediately done, and I want to give kudos for taking that very quick step. The other thing I want to mention, or want you to speak to, just again for the record, Mr. Commissioner, one of the, and I know you can't speak in detail with the case related to the human trafficking arrest that was just made. However, two quick follow-ups. If a victim is undocumented, is that information sent to federal authorities? And two, what protections are in place for victims of any crime, regardless of their status? Can you speak to those two areas of the law?
Yeah, number one, thank you for that. When it comes to victims, we are not providing any information to the Immigration Enforcement, to ICE. We're not providing any information because they are victims of crime, and we're not cooperating in the sense that all we're asking them is about the information relative to how they were victimized so that we can solve the crime and hold the persons accountable. And to the extent that they require U visas or some other type of visas, that's available to them as well. And services, every service that is available to any other victim who's a victim of that kind of crime is also provided to this victim. And with regard to your second question again was, well, when it comes to perpetrators, we are arresting people in human trafficking, and we're working with our local, state, and federal partners, number one, to identify who those traffickers are, because we want to go after them. And we're working with our partners and sharing information about the perpetrators. Now, when it comes to immigration, we're not working to turn them over, because immigration is not the responsibility of the local police, but we are enforcing the human trafficking laws and making the arrest for the criminal crime, the criminal act that's committed in our jurisdiction.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Commissioner, I got a couple more questions, and then I'll open up the floor if any of my colleagues have any other questions as well. So first off, I want to thank you from each one of our meetings. This is, I guess, our third hearing that we've had, but each time, we've asked you for deliverables, and you've delivered on them with the updates on it. So I appreciate that. One of them being the new deputy commissioner that you preceded and hired. So thank you for that. I did want to know if, because you had spoken briefly about the GTTF cases in the beginning of the hearing, and about holding people accountable and really getting to the bottom of that, which, as you know, Council President Scott and the council put forth at the last council meeting, pushing to get to the bottom of that. And so my question would be, I guess either you or the new deputy commissioner, what does the process look like if it's already been formed? When there is questions of credibility or a potential issue, what is the process? Like, has that process changed? Are we forming a new process moving forward? If you can just speak to that a little bit.
Well, first of all, thank you for that, and it's a topic of discussion we're having with Judge Berdar and the monitors in the Department of Justice on tomorrow. A couple of months ago, the judge gave instruction to the Department of Justice to find a way to do this, and so we can analyze it so we can not repeat the mistakes of the past. And so it's, with the help of the solicitor, it's being worked on, and it's a topic of discussion about how to go forward to get it done. And I believe, if I'm correct, we're close to actually selecting an entity to actually do that work for us. And so, much has already been done. We certainly agree that it should be done. When it comes to people who, and I think your question is credibility, we have to make internal management decisions about allegations made against individuals who work for our police department that are either substantiated or not substantiated, and find out how that person best serves our agency, and if that person's credibility causes harm to the agency and or harm to the criminal cases that we're trying to put through the criminal justice system to hold people accountable. But we now have that information.
So would it be a reasonable time frame by the next oversight hearing to have at least the framework of what that looks like, the process, or?
I believe that is doable for us to have by the next hearing, to talk about the process, about how we go about getting this done, and then how we deal with credibility issues when they're brought to our attention.
Sure, and I appreciate that. And then I guess related to the same topic, as it pertains to those like actually doing the investigations and internal affairs and stuff, I know that we've spoken over many months about being short-staffed on the necessary personnel to actually investigate these cases within the time frame allotted. Have we made progress on hiring new investigators so that they can handle whatever it is, the caseload that they're getting, so that cases are not expiring?
We have not yet hired individuals, but we have done an assessment already, and I'll ask him to say a few words. Number one, what we did, and I'll let him talk about the specifics, but we've, starting a long time ago, we identified the very minor cases that were occupying time and taking a long time that really could be resolved at a district level. And we created what's called expedited resolutions to move those minor cases, some 200 or so, back to the districts for command dispensations to be given, because it doesn't really require an investigation. It's lost property, or it's damaged property, or it's failure to appear, things we know the answer to without having to investigate. We've worked to move those back to the district, so literally reducing hundreds of cases in the Public Integrity Bureau, but there's some other systematic changes that the Deputy Commissioner has already begun to make.
Okay.
I'll let him talk about that.
You can come up to the podium if you like. We've made all the other deputy commissioners come up, and put them in prime time, so.
Except there's no notes here, so. So what I've done is done an assessment.
Sorry, can you just start by
I'm sorry.
saying your name and title?
Sure, Brian Nato, Deputy Commissioner for Public Integrity.
Thank you.
So I've done an assessment of public integrity, and I looked at the cases across the board and the way that we were lined up. So prior to my arrival, this new process that the Commissioner spoke about, the the expedited resolution process, is going to take about 10% of the cases from us and put them back in the districts where they more appropriately belong. Also, working with the monitoring team and DOJ, we're taking some other processes that are coming through. There are cases where it's very apparent that the violation occurred. The member will agree that the violation occurred and will be instituting punishment from the beginning, rather than doing a long, drawn-out investigation that takes time to prove the exact same thing that we're going to see from day one. So that process is going to go into effect as well, which should reduce us by about another 20%. And then what we've done is I'm reevaluating the process. So we're going to have some of our cases that are more minor in nature that don't need to take a 4 or 5 month investigation. We're going to create an entire squad that's just going to investigate those quicker offenses. Hopefully, what we don't want to do is have these cases weighing on not only my detectives, but also the members, because as it sits there, and our members are sitting there with these allegations hanging over their head, some of them which are sustained, some of them which are not sustained, it doesn't do the department any good having those hang over their head for 365 days. So we're going to expedite that process as well, so that the lesser offenses that don't take as long can be done in a quicker fashion, making sure that we're looking at every aspect and not missing anything. And then I'm have some of my squads of some of my stronger, more seasoned detectives do some of the more elongated cases that take longer to make sure that we do those correctly. So I believe that we have also gone out, we recruited, we have 3 more today, individuals that want to come to our bureau, so that'll be good. That'll add additional 3. I've added an extra captain who's going to oversee all the investigations so that the process moves along quicker and doesn't get stalled, because some of the cases are getting stalled along the way just because of the volume of those. So I need somebody to actually look at the volume and make sure that it's moving across the way. So my hope is that within the next 6 months that we're going to get caught up, that we're going to get the cases back where they're supposed to be, and hopefully reduce the burden on not only my folks, but also the members members that are at work in the street.
All right, so do you have the necessary personnel to do all the things that you're saying right now, or do you still need to hire more people?
Yeah, so we still need to recruit more. So what we're trying not to do is take people with no experience. So one thing we're sort of lacking at the moment is the training. So we're putting together a training program as well to train all detectives how to do internal affairs investigations. What I want to do though is get some detectives that actually have experience from the street, bring those folks in. We have been not being restricted from doing that. It's just a matter of finding individuals that want to come there, which is sometimes a little bit challenging, but we're hoping that the new recruitment, we're going to be able to do that. And so, like I said, this week alone, we had 3 that stated they were interested. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. What I've done is I've sort of gone to the folks that work over there and sort of challenged them to go out and find folks that they've worked with, that they feel comfortable with, that would work well in PIB. I think being a good detective is one thing. Also, being able to do the investigations is another. You have to have a fair and open process. You have to be able to look at the evidence and follow the evidence and not follow any connectivity that you may have to these people in the district. And I think right now we have a really good process for that. What I want to do is make sure that the folks that come there for the right reason, and that we can get ahead of the game. It's we have 1,800 something cases now we need to go through. It's a lot, but I think with the right leadership over there, I think we're going to get there.
So do you have a number of like how many more people you need till you're fully staffed?
So actually, just today I was getting the list from my lieutenants as to what the types of cases they have and what's the number, because then I could kind of look at those and figure out how long it's going to take to do each one and calculate that number out. Right now, to have a firm number of that, I don't. I mean, everybody can always say, hey, I need 10 more people, I need 20 more people. I want to make sure I'm getting effective people. So I don't have the number right now, only because today I was collecting the information. I'm going to sit with them, go through the silos, and make sure that we put them in bucket lists so that we can calculate the time frame it takes to do those cases. Now, what we run into sometimes is as you're do an investigation on one aspect, others pop up, and it makes the case a little bit more complicated. But for the most part, I should be able to tell by what bucket they're in, what the time frame is going to be, and lay that out and figure out what the needs are going to be. What I don't want to do is just grab extra people that aren't going to be, I won't need down the road.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Excuse me. Part of the answer to that is the expedited resolution, where we move these minor cases back to command discipline, is in pilot phase, and it's not fully implemented with all of the cases. But once that move, once that's fully implemented, it recalibrates the caseload per detective. And so the answer to the question today is very different than the answer to that question once we move those cases out to the districts and then recalibrate the caseload per detective there. It does need more people, but the answer is a moving answer.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Any last questions before we move to the next hearing? Mr. President?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Just the last 2 things that I would like to add. Just if we could have an update on the call reduction and just where we are year to date with taking calls over telephone reporting unit and online, just the sheer numbers.
Yeah. Come on.
I could talk a little bit, excuse me, I could talk a little bit about some of the initiatives we've already worked with the fire department as well. We were automatically dispatching on a number.
Chief of Staff, for the listening public,
Yes.
could you explain why you have
Yes.
to work for the fire department?
So for those who need kind of a breakdown, first of all, the fire department is also EMS. And in addition, they are also the frontline call taker when someone calls 911. So a lot of the coordinated effort we're going to have with the 911 and burden reduction as it relates to 911 is going to be in coordination with the fire department. We've had several meetings with them in looking at how police is dispatched to calls that are really led by the fire department and EMS. And so we've been able to systematically review automatic dispatch versus dispatch as needed, which is to say, of course, if the police are needed on a scene that's a medically related incident or some kind of traffic blocking is required, that is something for which we want to be able to know about and then be dispatched to. But prior to us having these conversations, there was simply an automatic dispatch for a police unit alongside of a fire unit, even if it was not needed. These are the kinds of burden reduction initiatives that we've been working closely together on. And this week, we're actually putting out that guidance to our dispatchers to make sure that they change that process so that they know that when the fire call, EMS call comes in, and it does potentially need a police response, they only dispatch as needed rather than automatically when it may not be needed. So, but other than that, the telephone reporting unit stuff or alternative reporting unit.
Deputy Commissioner Michael Sullivan, Council President, Council members. Year to date, there have been 33,383 calls that we would have dispatched police on that have been handled by that unit, and they've written 99,745 reports. So that unit is very valuable to burden reduction for our department.
Thank you. And what about online, CopLogic?
Online, so far this year in 2019, we've had 1,882 reports submitted, and of those, 1,434 of them have been accepted, and that means that they've met the requirements to be able to be reported online.
Okay, and Mr. Deputy, that CopLogic also computes how many man hours you saved doing those reports. Can you tell me how many man hours we saved and also the dollar amount?
We can calculate that and get it to you. I don't have those numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had the actual CopLogic report in front of you. Yeah, if you can give that to us later. And then, Mr. Commissioner, I think that, again, this is something that we have to get out to the public more because we can see just off the sheer volume of TRU that people are open to reporting their crime in a different way, and many of them would actually use online if more of them knew about it. My last question is for tonight is where are we year to date on our homicide clearance rate?
I think it's 37%. It fluctuates from day to day, but we've had a number of clearances. A couple of days ago, it was at 39. I think as of this morning, it's at 37, unless I'm correct.
As of this morning, it's at 36.4.
All right.
And where were we last year at this time?
Last year at this time, we were at 45.6.
Okay, so we have some makeup to make. And then also, for that unit, Mr. Commissioner, with all the shifts in detectives, is the homicide unit, do we believe it's now properly staffed, or do we still need more individuals in that unit?
I think for the amount of homicides and for the clearance rate, it needs more detectives. It also needs more experienced detectives. It needs more detectives, but more experienced detectives, so that we can get the caseload to the national acceptance rate. The best rate is 3 per year, and acceptable is 6 per year, and we're slightly above 6. And so we recently added, I believe, 6 in the last couple of months. How many was that? Yes, sir, 6. We recently added 6 in a supervisor in the last couple of months. Once we knew we were bringing more recruits in and we were able to staff more patrol officers, we added 6 more detectives and some restructuring. We knew that there was another iteration of that coming.
And I know this kind of moves into the last one, and you can respond in the next one if you want, but also I just think that my hope is that civilianization will also help with that, because then you can maybe use some of those folks to go over if they're qualified. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Commissioner, in closing, so first of all, thank you for those new efficiency measures, getting those numbers up on the telephone reporting. I think one of the things that we're hearing is that, if we can improve upon that, especially the online reporting, we can save a lot of man hours on the street, which just gives us, a great return on it.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that when we get our new records management system and we move into the new electronic reporting for officers, we can build a far more robust web-based reporting for the community members, because the infrastructure needs to be built for that to happen.
Right, and we'll ask the new IT guy next hearing about, making a nice, shiny online reporting website and stuff where people understand how they can report online and what they can report online, so it's really clear. I know we all try as council people in community meetings, but having those nice fancy videos that you guys have on your recruiting website, if we had that about reporting, I think you can just take the same website, change out some of the words and some of the videos, save a few $100,000. I think we can increase the amount of online reporting as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we're adjourned.
There was a race snack that I didn't hand off that I forgot to